Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, August 13th, 2025, and today we have a fun treat for you as I am joined by my buddy Nathan Rutz of Tilth Soil to talk about, well, quite a lot of things actually, about how their compost business works on the collection side. And by collection, I mean food scraps. We discuss tariffs and the composting business. We talk about peat, but also what a peatless mix would look like and how Tilth is organized as a worker-owned co-op, which is very cool. Also, in the name of full disclosure, Tilth is a show sponsor. Shouts to Tilth Tuesday. But I've known Nathan for like 6 or 7 years now, and I always enjoy chatting with him. And I figured, why not in front of you all? So let's do it. Nathan Rutz, welcome to Growers Daily.
So glad to be here, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you. We always have a lot of fun conversations, so this will be just another one of those, and excited to share that. Maybe let's start with having you just introduce your work a little bit, where you are, what you do, that sort of stuff.
Great. So we're Rust Belt Riders Composting and Tilth Soil in Cleveland, Ohio. We pick up food scraps. We have compost made. We make compost-based potting soil for home gardeners, cannabis growers, and organic vegetable growers. And we haul food scraps from residences, from municipalities, grocery stores, breweries, coffee shops, etc. Last year, we hauled about 4,000 tons, and we have a stated goal by 2030, we want to be doing 20,000 tons a year.
Okay, so take us through that. What does it look like when you talk about like hauling it? What are you hauling it in? What is the customer putting it in?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different ways that people interface with that. So on the residential side, we have our like sort of boutique service, which is where we pick up a 5-gallon bucket off the driveway or somewhere else at the house. That's the more expensive one because we pick that up in a Sprinter van, and then each of those gets power washed. You get swapped to clean one. We drop off that, and then we take the one that's full of food scraps. The more common way that people are opting into is drop-off, where we have locking 64-gallon rolling trash cans, just like you probably roll to the curb almost anywhere in the U.S. unless you haul your own trash. And then people open the lock, they drop their stuff in, and off they go. And then we pick it up. Right now we have a mixed fleet. We have box trucks, and we have one tipper truck, and we have another tipper truck on the way.
What's a tipper truck? Is that
tipper truck
you mean
is
just like a
cart lifter? So instead of putting the carts on a lift gate on a box truck and lifting that into the truck and then having to swap every time, it's much more labor efficient to do like a trash truck. And so the trash truck, so our tipper truck shows up, but it's more sealed than a trash truck because your typical trash truck, I know that we can get into the minutia of vehicles for picking up food scraps. But normal compactor trucks are not appropriate generally for food scraps because they don't actually hold liquid. And so because food scraps are very high moisture, you would end up with a disgusting mess dripping down the road if you had a typical compactor truck. So we have to use different kinds of trucks that have taller sides on the bed, so we have to lift the carts higher over the side of that sealed bed, basically.
And it has like an arm, like you see with the trash truck, so
Yeah.
it's like
Yep.
Oh wow, I'm going to imagine that those are not particularly cheap.
They are not.
Purchase.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those situations where you're much more able to pay people a better wage with the right equipment.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so I want to hear, and maybe this is one of them, but I wanted to just kind of hear some of the key challenges that you all face in running a business like this. And maybe it starts with the pickup side, or even maybe it starts with the customer sort of communication side. Like where does it start, and what are those challenges?
There are a lot of challenges in running a composting business. We have made, I don't know if we've made all the mistakes, but we've made a lot of them. Particularly when you start, composting and hauling is a very capital intense business to run. And when you start with no capital and you bootstrap a lot, it takes a long time to get that snowball rolling down the hill, where you can actually then like borrow money to be able to buy equipment or to lease equipment, etc. So a big challenge for if you're going to start a composting business is, particularly the hauling side, is how are you going to collect this stuff? What physically are you going to do? And make sure, like, really thinking about, like, can you do this in a way that's going to be sustainable for your body and financially? Can you charge, like, so one of the things, a big challenge for us is Ohio, just like Kentucky, has no mandates about food scraps. There's nobody saying you must divert food scraps. You know, in the West Coast, the East Coast, sometimes actually in the North too, There are states that have plans to reduce the amount of food scraps going to their landfills, which is fantastic. Here in the middle of the country, we have cheap landfills. So I'm going to point the blame number one at cheap landfills. And it's in the landfilling business in Ohio, probably Kentucky, I don't know, but I would suspect in Ohio it comes from filling up old strip mines. So you're like, hey, there's a big hole in the ground, let's fill it with crap. So that's sort of, and also there's the whole transition post World War II and the Resource Conservation and Reclamation Act. There's a whole lot of interesting interlocking complexities. But a lot of trash companies started off as pig farmers, because before the dawn of ubiquitous plastics and so-called disposables, there was nothing that was disposable. Everything was either reusable or compostable or edible. And so a lot of the trash companies started as pig farmers that would take all the slop from town and feed their pigs with it and then bring pigs back to town. And that's actually really cool, except if you have disease problems. Because pigs can pass on diseases to humans. And then, of course, if the pigs start eating a lot of plastic, that's a problem too. So we have all this, we have the before the 1976 Resource Conservation and Reclamation Act, RCRA, we have all these unlined landfills that are just leaking, like seeping trash juice, unregulated trash juice into the groundwater. And post-RCRA, landfills are now highly engineered structures that, more or less are, the first RCRA landfills are now getting retired. So there, we'll see how well is that engineering going to hold up over the next 10,000 years. We have this whole mess to intersect with, and so we say, okay, what do we do? What we are trying to do at Rust Belt Writers Composting right now is to do right by the food scrap portion of the nutrient shed, the material shed, in our area, in our region, and we define that we don't have hard boundaries on it. It's sort of fuzzy, but we think about Northeast Ohio as our neighborhood, and we want to do right by this neighborhood. And to me, that means, particularly for food scraps, there's about 300,000 tons of food scraps landfilled every year from the greater Cleveland metro area. And I'd like to see, by the time I'm ready to be composted, about 3/4 of those food scraps getting a better home. I don't know how populations are going to shift. Cleveland's been losing population for decades, but we are in one of the best places in the United States. If you're concerned about climate change, we have water and fairly moderate temperatures, and so I would suspect that in my lifetime the population may go up. But anyway, being able to develop the reps and the ability and the knowledge of how to operate the machines and also make the compost and apply the compost and grow the food seems like something really worth doing, because we care about people and the planet. This was I went way high level there, but the challenges we face are low landfill. One of them is low landfill tipping fees, and the reason that's a challenge is because you can't charge as much in order to compete on price. If you want to get to the higher tonnage, you can't charge a premium to remove people's food scraps, particularly commercial food scraps. And some of that is the most desirable feedstock for NOP composting, because if you're a brewery and you're not hopefully many breweries do give a hoot about where their spent grain is going. Many don't. Some do go actually to farms. But if you don't give a hoot, you're just going to go with a low-cost option. Right now, the low-cost option is landfills. So to compete on price, to get to the goal of actually taking care of our ecoregion, our biome here in the Southern Great Lakes, we need to get to a much higher level of diversion. But in order to get to a much higher level of diversion, we have to be able to compete on price with landfills, or crank the price up on landfills. And I think the answer is some of each, hopefully in various ways.
So that in other words, in some ways, like one of your biggest limiting factors is your access to the feedstocks and I'm assuming more or less like nitrogenous feedstocks, because I would assume that you can probably get more wood chips than you can food scraps and brewery waste and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I mean, at the moment, there's a dual challenge of we don't even have the capacity. If all of a sudden everybody was ready to pay for food scrap removal, there's nowhere to take it. So building composting infrastructure, it's a chicken and egg sort of thing, where the feedstock is out there. We know a lot of the places that have it. We know the price-ish that we need to get to for them to send it to us instead of to the dump. But right now, we don't have the capacity to take that stuff. So to that end, we are working on opening a new composting facility here in the city of Cleveland. We've got a lot of cool stuff going on. There's a 6-acre industrial parcel that the city of Cleveland has voted to lease us for 30 years in order to build a composting facility. Yeah, we're going to try to build a really cool aerated static pile system, hopefully with some heat recovery built in, try to do it as right as humanly possible because it is in the city, and other composting facilities in cities in Ohio have gotten shut down for stinking up the neighborhood, and we are unwilling to do that.
Yeah.
We shan't.
Right. We'll probably touch on some more of these, key challenges as we go through the rest of this conversation, but we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, tariffs in the compost industry, BRB.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
All right, so we had a Patreon question come in, Nathan, that it was, I think at this point, a few months back, but that was from Patreon member Kyle Putnam, and Kyle Putnam just wrote, Peat plus tariffs. So in the composting world, are there things, and it could be peat or it could be other things, that tariffs have interrupted for you all yet, or that you can foresee?
Mostly we've been made nervous about tariffs more than actually had them impact us. So the nervousness has been around peat, especially because in our potting soil we do use peat. Happy to go on a nice long digression about peat someday. The Canadian Magnum Peat Association managed to hold off tariffs on peat to the U.S., so nobody's paying tariffs on peat from Canada to the U.S. Maybe from other countries. There is some, I know there's like peat brought in from Latvia occasionally and the Baltic states, but Canadian peat, there's no tariffs on it currently. One issue, there is a fair amount of international trade in composting equipment. That's really on the larger scale, like where we want to get to. So a lot of that stuff may be tariffed, but we haven't run into that specifically yet.
I'm kind of curious if you would kind of talk a little bit about peat, because this is something that comes up when we talk about potting soils, when we talk about sustainability and those sort of things. Like, as a company who uses this product, like, how do you all think about this or talk about it?
So we think about peat frequently and where it comes from and what it is and the scale of its extraction. And so right now, why do we use peat? We use peat because there's nothing else like it. There is no replacement for peat currently. So what does peat have going for it? If you want to use compost in a potting soil, compost is generally neutral or a little bit basic. So you need something that's going to balance it on a pH, on an acidity scale, and peat moss does that. Also in potting mix, you want it to be loose and light, but you also want it to hold water. Peat also does that. You also want it to not cost $1 zillion. Peat also does that. So you have the acidity, you have the physical properties that a good quality peat has that is really desirable in a potting soil. You have a price, you have a well-developed market that exists. You also don't want it to be horrific for the environment. Another consideration for potting soil is you also don't want it to have a nitrogen draw. So there are some products that that are, because they're fresher carbon, they're not pickled like peat is, like wood fiber products are a really cool thing that I'm interested in using and playing with, particularly maybe for replacing perlite, but those do have some nitrogen draw, and so that then increases the amount of additional nitrogen that you have to put in your potting mix to balance that out. So the sustainability of peat is an important topic and one to not shy away from as a potting soil maker. So in most of the criticism of the use of peat comes from the British Islands, where peat has been over-harvested for over 1,000 years, largely for power, for heat. And so there are actually still, as I understand it, a few peat-burning power plants. So the amount of peat being sucked up for energy is way more than is used in horticulture. But so if you're in, if you're in the British Islands or you're in Western Europe, where most of the peat has been depleted by civilization over the last 2,000 years. Yes, I get it. You're like, yes, using more peat seems like a bad idea. In Canada, my best understanding is that the peatlands of Canada are incredibly vast, and that 0.03% or so of the peatlands of Canada are harvested for horticultural use. There's a good paper on this by James Altland from the USDA about peat moss, where he really looked into the various different aspects of the peat harvest and explains it pretty thoroughly. Peat moss does grow. It grows very slowly. According to Dr. Altland, the replacement rate of peat outpaces in Canada, like naturally, without even replanting the drained bogs. There is more peat accumulating in Canada than is harvested for horticultural use. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be circumspect about it, but that is something worth noting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough subject because it takes forever for it to regenerate, and it's also a really good sequestration of carbon. So there is a little bit of that. The other uses that you talked about, like energy usage, I know that it's used often in like filtration and other aspects. Those things are a little bit more concerning to me than horticultural use, just because it goes from being in the ground to going back in the ground. And you do use, like in the case of a soil mix, and I know you are losing carbon along the way, but you're least, and you're using carbon to extract it, but you are at least like replacing some percentage of it in a different area.
Yeah.
I don't want to feel like I justify it that way, but that is often how I think about it, at least in terms of horticulture.
I mean, for us, we live in the world that exists today. We don't get to live in the world that the solar punk utopia that I wish existed right now.
That we're working towards, right?
We're working towards it. Yes, that's what this like. Yes, another world is necessary. I feel like saying, "Oh, you can't use peat," is kind of like, "Oh, if you care about the environment, are you driving your car to the farmer's market?" Just the like endless litany of like, yes, there's the yes, we live in the world as it is. If you look at the so-called alternatives, they're actually often worse in a lot of regards.
I do think that gets overlooked. I think you and I have maybe talked about just, the extraction of coconut coir from places that are low in minerals and carbon already. Taking that product out of those areas in large quantities can be detrimental to those environments as well. So, like, there is a little bit of that also.
Yes. And there's even, like, if you're looking at pine bark or wood fiber, all that stuff is from the excesses of the U.S. construction industry and southern yellow pine plantations. And so all those alternatives, yes, those are sort of waste products. They're like the marginal southern yellow pine, which is actually not a type of pine. It's mostly loblolly pine is the more specific species. But the southern yellow pine industry in the United States plants giant, humongous monocultures, and they're conventionally farmed. And so we have this marginalia from the stuff that can't be used for construction that can be used for wood fiber products or pine bark products. And is that better? You got to do some real deep system dynamics stuff that I don't think anybody's done. So I just have to wave my hands a little bit and be like, what do I think about this? So the peat industry to me seems, it doesn't seem any worse. It's hard for me to see how it's worse than the southern yellow pine industry. All that said, the dream would be compost as whole media. Can we make potting soil that's just compost?
Can we?
The short answer is absolutely, but will it behave exactly the same way? And that answer is no. So you can't, with the right combination of stuff in your compost, with really nice, if you've got nice horse manure and you've got nice, your feedstocks are always going to, composting reduces the amount of nitrogen. There's a maximum concentration of nitrogen that can exist in a compost because the mostly bacteria and the fungi will basically burp and fart and poop it out if there's a higher concentration than they can actually incorporate into their bodies. And sometimes it's nice to have a little extra around in the system for young plants to go boom. So that's the thing. How is your nitrogen stored? How much is it in the necromass, which is the dead bodies of the microbes? And how much is actively being cycled? And how much is like bound to other things? So, but the dream being a potting soil or a seedling media that is compost. Maybe it's some biochar, and maybe we're doing weird things like planting cover crops in windrows of compost with different root architectures that once we terminate those cover crops, then we leave the roots in and somehow we shred the mix just right to preserve that porosity, and we use it within 6 months or 3 months or something so that the roots haven't fully decomposed, so you have some of that loft. So anyway, that's the Solar Punk Utopia version of potting soil.
I like it. I think that I hope to see you all trialing some of these things, because I'd be down to trial them with you if you want me to try some veggies on them.
I do. I tried a teeny weeny just like playing with it last year, and I haven't. We're not at a place to be able to really trial this at any kind of reasonable scale, but that is coming soon with the new site.
Cool. Well, that's all very interesting stuff, and we're going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about one of the fascinating aspects we somehow have not mentioned about Tilth Soil, the cooperative part. So, be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. We know it's peak season, you're busy, but the messages you send now are what drive renewals later. That's why Farmhand is offering free instant access to their farmer-built newsletter builder. No demos, no setup fees, just drop your logo, upload your list, and start sending farm-branded emails that boost sales, engage members, and save you hours each week. Get free access today at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. All right. So, Nathan, one of the cool things about Tilth Soil is the sort of worker-owned cooperative aspect. Can you first say, maybe there's going to be people who don't know what a worker-owned cooperative is, so maybe start there and then talk about what that looks like in terms of a composting company.
Yeah, so a worker-owned cooperative is a business where the workers are the owners. And at Rust Belt Riders, we have equal ownership. We have 14 equal owners currently, and there's a path to ownership after 2,000 hours of work at the business. And that means then you have the opportunity to pick up the weight with the rest of us and have to make heavy decisions. And an owner, so in the years in which we are profitable enough, there are extra dividends, patronage dividends, that are distributed to worker owners, so that's a benefit. And there's also the benefit of being the folks that are legally responsible to, like, you get to make the decisions. We strive to have a democratic workplace anyway, like for everybody, so that the people doing the work are able to impact the way that the work is done, even if you're not an owner. But we are a worker-owned cooperative in that we have one worker, one vote as owners, so that we, in business decisions like, are we going to open a new compost site? These are the people that vote on it. It's not one person that says, yes, this is where we're going exactly. It's these 14 people discussing it and making choices together. And the hope, the promise of the worker co-op is equity, and also the harnessing of, like, if we're yoked together, can we go places with more vigor and than if we're not yoked together? And can each person's sort of unique brilliance be better expressed when there is commitment to the whole thing in an ownership sense? And I think the answer is yes. There's a lot of. It's also very challenging because almost none of us, probably listening or at Rust Belt, grew up in contexts where there is so much attempt, however many warts we have, but so much attempt at doing things in a collaborative manner. And so the unlearning of top-down command and control expectations is really challenging. We have incurred a lot of cost in terms of having meetings, because there isn't like you go to this person, they make all the decisions. That's quick. But we think the hope here is to do something durable and good. And we think that doing this in this way is more durable and good than doing it the normal way.
I'm on our soccer board, and this is going to be somewhat relative, but like I'm on our soccer board. There is a hierarchy there, but there's also every decision kind of has to run through the board. So when you're in a situation with a cooperative, in this particular instance, there is no particular leader to the company? How does that
There is structure. People are elected to roles. It's not totally flat where there's like every decision is made by everyone. That is not the case. So we have scopes of work, and there are people that are the lead in those scopes of work, and there's a person that's the whole organization lead who is elected. And we have the worker owners who own the business, and the worker owners elect a board, and then the board is like responsible for the governance decisions, and the board sort of endorses or chooses the organizational structure, and then we fill in the roles in this structure. And so there is hierarchy, there is like communication, there's shape to it. Inside of the cell there are different parts. There's different parts of the body. And the different parts of the body have different, the organelles have different functions, and they interrelate in different ways, and they function internally a little bit differently, but they are distinct, but they are within the cell.
So you basically have people who have different roles.
Yes.
It would be, yeah. Okay, I got it. No, that's fair. Did Rust Belt / Tilth, did you all start out as a co-op, or was that a later decision?
It was a decision from the very start, but at the very beginning it was a 50-50 LLC between Michael and Dan, who started it on bikes 11 years ago, and we acted as a co-op for many, many years. I came on as like the person wackily inclined toward compost and communing with the microbes. But so we formally became a worker-owned cooperative on December 27th, 2021. So there was a legal transition. And so there's this saying in co-ops that if you've met one co-op, you've met one co-op, because they're all very different. I'm sure there are some archetypes that they fall into, but we didn't change entities. We worked with the co-op attorney to put cooperative bylaws into an LLC, which is possible in Ohio. Every state's a little bit different. Some states have specific co-op structures that have specific benefits to them. For us, that doesn't exist. So we're an LLC that has cooperative bylaws as our governing structure.
Interesting. I wonder if, I guess I wasn't really, I thought they always had to be like, there was like a specific registration for co-ops. So that's kind of cool to know that like an LLC could evolve, I suppose, and a dual partnership LLC could evolve into something like a cooperative if they, in a situation like you have great workers and you're like, I'd like to do more for them. They are really bought in already. Like that sense of propriety is really hard to find. And so maybe bringing them on as an owner could be, an option for them. Like, does that resonate in terms of, when you have these employees who are willing to do all this work for you, just being like, I want you to stay around.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that. And also it's the decentering of the decentering of the entrepreneur. We have these myths about like, entrepreneurs are these like magical people that create things, and the whole world revolves around these great people. Whereas the real world, all things depend on all things, and so the idea that we're going to decenter the ego of this person is the founder and they are the thing that drives this boat. Too many mixed metaphors. I apologize. But it's like what do we think? This is conjecture. Like, what do we think we want workplaces to be like? Have we ever, there's some reaction to having had bad bosses or the feeling of arbitrary decisions from on high, and you want to do it in a way that isn't that. But schismogenesis can only get you so far. So you want to, what do we actually want, and how do we want to relate to each other, and how do we want to? We spend more time with our colleagues than we do with our families for most of us in the United States. And so how do we want to relate to each other? And that's kind of like we think we don't have the answer. It's like, will this have been a silly thing to do looking back in 30 more years or something? I don't know. But we think that working collaboratively sounds better than not doing that. And also, if I think it's more ecological. I want to live in a society that adopts mycorrhizal economics. And can we adopt that sort of like, I think of myself as an obligate symbiont, just like a mycorrhizal fungus. I can only exist in relationship with others. I rely on a mutually beneficial relationship with other human beings to be my best self or to exist at all, really. and the recognition that no person is an isolate. All of us are a network of relationships to the human and more than human worlds. And so we're trying to inhabit that in the structure of our workplace.
I feel that. And I also think in a less metaphorical sense, I think we've all been in a situation at a workplace where we're like, we like it here. We like the people that we deal with. We like the environment. But we lack that sense of propriety, that sense of ownership, that sense of being able to do I have the ideas and present them and be heard in that way. And I think that's really cool. Nathan, this has been a blast as always. Thank you so much for joining me.
Glad to be here. Have a great day.
Thank you. All right, I hope you all enjoyed that episode. You can learn more about Nathan and Tilth Soil at tilthsoil.com or follow them on the gram or wherever you follow stuff. Let us know, Patreon members, in that August show thread, who are some people or types of people who you would like to hear from. Anyways, that's it for this Wednesday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat like this one or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. That's like what makes this thing keep rolling. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of August, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Tom Walker, Alan Nixon, Tony Anschutz, and Anxious Pancakes. These are our earthworms from last month, so double shout out to earthworms. Remember that. Big thank you to you all. All right, so today's story, continuing on with our Piper story about the plumber and the mysterious customer. Anyway, so Zeke, the plumber, finally gets to the lab where the scientist was reluctant to take him, and starts to look into the clog. The water is not draining away, so he simply tries to snake it. The scientist tells him he already tried that and it didn't work, but Zeke assures him, the snake that Zeke uses is industrial, and so Zeke starts to run the snake into the pipes using this special drill, and it just stops. Zeke thinks, okay, this is going to be a big job. And then suddenly the drill is yanked out of Zeke's hand and smashes into the drain. The scientist says, see, that's what happened to me. And Zeke stands there stunned. This is nothing like anything Zeke has ever seen, and says, I'm afraid this is no ordinary drain clog. So what's actually happening here? That is for tomorrow on the Piper. I'm just going to keep with that one. I like that. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.